Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Punch, Kick, Choke Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts, and we're doing one of our offshoot episodes today. If you've been watching our show regularly, you know that what we do on Thursday nights is we host a Zoom meeting where we have live participants asking questions. The nights when we do our host chat, we actually put the camera on our participants who ask the questions, and we really dig into usually a person's life. But what we do on these shorter and offshoot episodes is we dig into a topic, and we asked a guest to come along who we feel can really amplify the topic for us. And today we're really excited to have Kyoshi James Freeze with us. And Sensei Dauphin is going to introduce the topic in a sec, but we're a little quicker on the introductions during these episodes because we want to get right to the meat of it. So I'm Sean Benson. I'm a student of Legacy Martial Arts and Fitness, and my direct sensei is Sensei Randy Dauphin. He's a 7th degree black belt in karate, a 4th degree black belt in the Iaido. His Iaido instructor and mine as well is Sensei Nicholas Suino. He's an 8th dan in Iaido, and he is a 6th dan in Jiu-Jitsu, a 6th dan in judo as well. And then Hanshi Gary Legacy, who's been my instructor since 1993. Sensei Dauphin's instructor, has taught Sensei Suino. Karate takes Iaido from Sensei Suino. He is a 10th dan and the founder of Legacy Shorin-ryu. And I'm going to let Sensei Dauphin introduce Sensei Freeze a little more if he likes, and our topic.
Yeah, so, and the only thing I want to say is, Sean, you're not a student of Legacy Martial Arts and Fitness. That's just a business name for this facility. You're a student of Legacy Shorin-ryu. As I'm a student of Legacy Shorin-ryu, that's really important to me. And I don't want anybody in our community to not understand that we're all students of Legacy Shorin-ryu. That's how we started. This is just a business name for this community. Okay,
awesome.
So
love it.
Thank you, Ray.
So James Freeze and I, James is a student of Sensei Legacies. He does Hakusuru with him. James and I met about like 15, 16 years ago, maybe 20 years ago in Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
I fucking love this guy, man. Like, it really, I super do. Like, 7th degree black belt in classical Goju karate under Hanshi Carlos Montalvo. Trained really closely with Tom Payette, who's the real world Liam Neeson from Taken. And he's got so much experience when it comes to like the practical side of martial arts and the classical side of martial arts. Like, I really see him as a person who has a really good balance of both from every range. Firearms, likes them. In close combat weapons, likes them. Third party bodyguarding, self-defense stuff, likes all of that. Training classical kata, loves that as well. So he's a great guy, and you'll learn a lot from him if you listen. And today's topic that we're going to talk about is how do you make or change your classical art to make it practical? That's the question number one. And then question number two is, do you actually need to? Do you need to change anything, or should you change anything? So that's the topic. Let's I'm gonna go around, and Sean, you'll be last. We'll let you have the last comment. I'm gonna go, James, give us your thoughts on that quickly. Everybody think of things you want to ask as well. So James, give us a quick 10,000 foot version of what you think about that. Then we'll go Sensei Suino, then we'll go Sensei Legacy. Then I'll provide a couple of things after Sensei Legacy, and then Sean will go to you last. So James, what do you think of that topic?
Perfect. So can you repeat question number one again? I want to make sure I answer the right question at the right time.
Yeah, it's just basically like about the dichotomy between traditional martial arts or classical martial arts and people who say they're practical martial artists or real world martial artists, right? And what do you think the balance is? Do you need to change your classical training? And if so, why? Or
it's interesting because I think that the classical training is so important. Everybody has a starting point, and everybody that I know have started at a dojo training somewhere, learning how to block and punch, right? And then, you know, as you progress through your training, you decide what paths you're going to take. Sometimes you're pushed in different directions, and it's for good reasons. And it gives you a much different kind of perspective on things as well for training. I find that I look back at all my training and I don't think any part of it was bad, right? Even if things changed and I went in different directions, it was a learning experience all the way through. So from, I can still remember in my first karate class where I threw my first, low block. To this day, it's like, a vision in my head from yesterday. And then, the kata and stuff. But I think with kata, you don't really learn kata right away. You learn the moves. And then, as you study longer and longer and longer, then it starts to make more sense, right? And I think a lot of people maybe lose that if they don't continue through it and they don't see the application of what the katas will do further down the road for how they would work, right? I mean, when you look at a kata, I mean, there's a lot of things with combinations and stuff in katas that you would never see in a real life scenario. I think that, you take a combination apart and go, well, that wouldn't be right like that. But however, you can take pieces and parts of that and the principles from it and apply that, right? So when we get into the meat and potatoes of sort of like, self-defense and things like that, there's a real it kind of crosses over, right? So the practical application on the street would be slightly different than what I would think would be in the dojo. And it was, I think, interestingly enough, yesterday I was watching a video and the guy kind of tore a couple things apart and said that, in the dojo, everything is amicable, right? You bow to somebody to start, when it's going to happen, right? And this and that. Whereas in a self-defense application, you don't always know it's going to start, right? So there's always that kind of, you're a little bit behind. But, I thought about that and think, kata teaches us that to be that ready position kind of all the time. When you go to Mukso, when you set yourself up, you kind of get that positioning mentally, and then you go from there. So you're teaching yourself to be able to turn a switch on quickly, right? And then when the kata is over, you turn that switch back off, right? And I think that's a really good mental aspect to think about with kata because it gives us a mental focus as well as a physical one. And then, through years of training and stuff, you start applying and doing things. So I think they both have, one kind of meets the other, but if somebody doesn't train long enough in a classical system, they'll never get it, right? And then and they won't have that kind of feel. And then, as things go along and you train more, you want to expand your knowledge and see different things, and that's where you kind of start adding in what you want to do and how you want to apply it, right? I think kata teaches a lot. I think the thing that kata doesn't teach is that the actual reality of what happens in an altercation, right? And I don't think anything teaches that until it actually happens for anybody. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's super important all the way through, but I think that the more you train, the more you understand, right? And the application comes right back on from training over time and working with people, right? Working with different systems and different people, you learn different, get the different ideas and kind of apply from there. I think that was one of my biggest things was starting to expand out beyond the like the traditional Goju system and seeing how everything else worked in different systems, and all of a sudden noticing there's a lot of similarities, right? Even though it's a different, might be like when I did some of the Jeet Kune Do stuff or stuff with Tom, there's still a lot of similarities in all the systems, and that's where you start really putting it together.
Thanks, James. I agree with a lot of the things you just said, and I have some thoughts about some of the things you said, which is great. So, Sensei Suino, how do you want to react to what Kyoshi Freeze said and the question about making classical training practical, or if you need to?
A lot of wonderful detail there. I think the same way about a lot of those things. I was reflecting as Freeze Sensei was talking about the history of it, in a oversimplified way. What happened was there were a bunch of people that needed to fight to either protect themselves or to go to war. And there was a lot of brutality and probably a lot of variation in what they did. And then some of them started to say, look, we see these same scenarios over and over again. Let's get a lot better at them. So they created series that they would repeat. Eventually that results in kata. Then you have whole systems that train in kata with prearranged ippon kumite or sparring sets. And then the UFC comes along, and all of a sudden you need to put a lot of different skill sets together, and you don't know exactly what's happening next. It's a really interesting progression. And I think there's some food for thought there between the original world of combat and all its forms that got codified into kata and classical systems, and then how do you take that back out into the UFC or into street fighting or into war? So I don't have a final answer on that, but I think it's really interesting to think about that evolution.
Thanks, Setsuna. That's there's lots to think about in your answer as well. The one thing that popped into my head when you were talking about it is, I just thought about, like, in, you know, the heart of Africa, maybe 600, 700 years ago, after a kill, and they come back to the fire and they reenact it and everybody eats, and, you know, they do this stuff. And is that not just kind of like a kata? But anyway, Sense of Legacy, what do you want to add to that? Or what thoughts do you have about making classical training practical, and if you need to?
My answer to that is no. Those who came before us, the guys who invented martial arts, bet their lives on it. We're the guys in the gym fooling around. They didn't do all that stuff that we do today. Even though it's good to get in better condition, you know, you go to gyms and you do weights and different stuff to make you better. The actual fight doesn't take, is not physical. You know, you need somebody who, I just went blank there for a second. Those who say they only teach useful techniques or all the best techniques, they're a lot like a person eating a raw steak. You know, they say the classical thing is, just think about it. Picture a steak that you love. Just look at it right now in your mind. Did you think about the salt? Did you think about the guy flipping the steak over? You know, there's a lot of different things that make that steak. And in martial arts, it's not being able to punch or kick. It's having the nerve to stand in front of somebody who's trying to knock you out or stab you. So all the training really takes place in the mind. The physical is good. Even without training, you could throw a punch if you were smart enough, right? So it does not have to be changed. You know, it just has to be transferred over. When you're standing, and also you spar in a dojo, right? You spar all the time. So those things like James was saying, that you know, you go to other styles and other techniques and that they're all right there. And they're all trained to you in a way that would come out naturally and best for you. So not training the mind and not training your own karate style, I find is wrong. You know where that all starts? Looking for a dojo. I would suggest that if a dojo opens up in your area, you don't just go because it opened up in your area. You search out, go 20 miles instead of joining a bad karate dojo. I'm going to give you some news. 85 to 90% of the karate dojos in the world right now, Japan, everywhere else, are not good dojos. I once said that to a grandmaster, somebody who's really famous, and he said, Mr. Legacy, you're giving them a very big percentage or a very small percentage. He says it's more like 95. So karate is not to be changed.
I think that Grandmaster is actually Sense of Legacy. I think the two of you were talking about that. I think it was him who said that to you. I think you're being generous, and I think I was standing there when you two were talking about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'd forgotten it was you. See, what a great martial artist you are.
Thank you. I'll send you that $20 later.
Okay, I take more than that.
Sensei, are you okay? We'll go around. We'll get to some more questions for sure. So
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with you 100%. So before I turn it over to Sean, I just want to say, you know, when I think of martial arts, while I'm a karate and Hakusuru and Iaido practitioner, and very rudimentally grapple. So there's other people like James is good at grappling. Sean is good at grappling. Sensei Suino is amazing at grappling. It could be different in the grappling realm. Like that could be something, I don't want to But I think as far as striking goes, or Iaido goes, or Hakatsudo goes, I agree 100% with Sensei Legacy. It's about how you think about it. And it's about your attitude when you approach it. Because if any one of us is controlling all of the time and all of the space in any conflict outside of the dojo, and we're thinking about it correctly, we're going to prevail. Like, that's a recipe for success, period. Like, and I think that's what the classical people suffer in the classical realm from the way they think. They believe in a fantasy that how it transpires in the dojo is how it's going to transpire in real life. And they don't consider what will happen. They don't consider 2 o'clock in the morning, being asleep in your bed and somebody climbing in through your window. They don't consider that. Which is something that I was taught when I was a white belt. When I was a white belt, Sensei Legacy said, you should think about why somebody would want to attack you and what your response would be to that attack. And I don't think a week goes by that I don't do that. So that's a little bit of the context I want to, there's some things that Sensei Free said about kata that spur a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to take the time. So I want to just give it to Sean, and then we can go around a little bit on some different ideas. I have some questions and maybe other people have questions. After you're done, Sean, let's throw it to Sensei Suino and he can provide a thought or a question for the group.
Awesome. Yeah, for me, I like the idea that it doesn't need to be changed, because I think about the way to, like, we're really starting to work Bunkai heavily in the Toronto club. And it's really important to Alden and I to have that be a thing that isn't talked about and just done. And that is classical karate. So that's not a change. That's literally taking what's in there. And that's something that I think about when I watch McDojo videos and stuff, and I go, yeah, they're just not doing complete martial arts is all. Like, they might even be starting in the right spot, but then not understanding. And when people then shit on traditional martial arts, I'm like, you're shitting on bad martial arts. It doesn't matter, like, because they're not including everything that good martial arts includes. And so where I go with that is, and I'm going to use like my example of getting sober. Like, for years, I would dip my toe in the pool of what sobriety was, and then maybe like for a week not drink, and then go party and fuck up my life again. And it wasn't until I gave over completely, like said, okay, what is a system by which people get sober? I'm going to do all of it. And I think about that in relation to martial arts. And Hanshi, you always say this. Sorry, by the way, for getting the name of the club wrong. I didn't mean to do that. And that actually, to me, feeds into a bit to this question. There's Legacy Shorin Ryu, which is the core of what we're doing. And then there's more surface level ways to bridge gaps to a community. And that to me is something like free sparring. Like, that's different from 2-person drills that would be more effective and deadly than sport fighting. But in any case, yeah, going back to the idea of giving over completely to a style, it then changes me as a person. Whereas if I just take a la carte, i.e. don't do classical martial arts, I don't really change as a person. I'm the same guy who can say I hit a heavy bag or work in a certain way. And the last thing I want to say about it is, like, one of the most highly regarded movies of the year is Denzel Washington doing Macbeth. And that to me goes exactly to what we're talking about. Like, you've got a 400-year-old classical work that is blowing everybody's minds, and they didn't change it. Sure, the camera moved in cool ways, but they literally just went, this works, it still works, and we're just going to do it well. And then all of a sudden you've got a hit from a 400-year-old play. And I think that's what classical martial arts is. When done right, it includes everything that people are trying to chase in other arenas.
Amazing. Thanks, Sean. I wrote that down. I haven't seen it, but I love Macbeth. It's my favorite Shakespeare. And I love Denzel. He's like in my top 5 actors. So combination sounds good. Sensei Suino.
I want to talk about the hard work involved in taking your classical martial arts training into real-time applications, because that is fascinating. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't get there. I think there's a lot of bad fighters who potentially could be a lot better if they had the discipline and the mentorship to take the classical movements and classical mindsets farther down that path. Whatever you think of John Jones personally, when you watch him fight, he implicates a lot of really classical martial arts movements into his fights. GSP A lot of, and when and you can see it in the quality of the basics, right? Hard work on fundamentals is part of a classical martial arts mindset. My student Dan Holland is amazing that way. He looks more like kata when he fights, right, than almost anybody I've met. Randy, you're an example of that too. The kata and the fighting look similar. If you're that good at that, when someone attacks you on the street, you're going to look more like your kata than someone who hasn't trained as hard as well. So I'm really interested in that, because I think one of the reasons we don't see more of it is just really, really hard. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of time, and some really good guidance to get there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. You know, what does it take? What does it take to look just like kata in fighting? What does it take to look just like judo fundamental practice in randori? Yeah, so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on that.
What order are we going, Sensei? Who do you want to go first?
I would like to hear from Freeze Sensei first, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Perfect. All right. Well, I mean, for sure, just the hard work of being in the dojo and being disciplined to get to that level is going to be the hardest part for students. And I think that through guidance, when you have new people and showing them that hard work, that it's coming from the top, that translates down to the students as well. I think, you know, if you stand and watch everything everybody does all the time, then I think they get that idea that it's okay for them to do that as well. And I think that, you know, and I've learned this through the years too, that it's all lead by example, and, you know, hard work in the kata. I mean, and then just applying stuff and then just doing it over and over. And then you get to that no thought process where the mind kind of you just do it. And I think that definitely helps and gives that kind of push for, you know, making things, just like you said, like kata and sparring kind of looking like they're kind of one, just through years and years of training, and, you know, not veering off and doing different things, and then sticking to what the true classical part is as well.
Hanshi, what do you think about that?
Well, if you all think about where martial arts came from, who actually invented it was Buddha, right? The monks couldn't sit there. They were jittery, so he made them do exercises in order to be able to meditate that long. So they had to empty their minds from the pain, right? How long do you think it takes to do that, to become a Buddha or somebody to empty their minds? Not a year, not 2 years, not 30 years, more than 30 years. Okay, so taking it out into the street is not being able to do more. It's being able to do less. You have to empty your mind, and you have to rely on your 30 years of 50 years of training to bring you through that. If you're standing there looking to beat this guy or looking to do certain things, you're going to be defeated with your own thoughts. You need to have an empty mind, right? So start with it's not the physical that we have to work on when fighting. We can pick up the physical by doing a few exercises once or twice a week. It's the other part. When you're standing facing another human being who wants to destroy you, you have to not only have the nerve to be there, you have to empty your mind and overcome everything there in order to be yourself and all the training techniques that you've practiced for 50 years. So that's my look at it and what fighting really is. Yeah, it doesn't matter how good your stick is, as long as you know how to use it. So in a way, on an esoteric or a physical level, it's to know your martial art good, but it's your mind that's going to get you through your fight, your nerve, your state of calmness. I'll leave it at that.
Sean, what do you got?
You know, Sensei Freeze used a word that really sticks out for me, which is discipline. And the reason I mention that is, like, if I had to go to my park next to my house right now and do 2 hours of kata, and I mean like good kata, I don't mean marking it. I mean stances, hands beginning and ending in the right spot. You know, all the stuff that kata is for me right now at my level, I would find that more difficult even with my sprained fingers, than going to my jujitsu club and rolling for 2 hours. Like actually more difficult, because to be in a reactive state is pretty straightforward for me. It's just like, okay, I'll do what I can in the moment. But to be alone and working in a way where I'm the one who has to make sure that back leg straight, front leg bent, right? Like you get what I'm getting at. So the continual focus with no let up, because I'm the one who has to be vigilant, that for me is an intense amount of creation of the sort of Hanshi's talking about the mental idea, and it's like that's where karate has built for me something that I was never good at. Like I don't know if I was ever ADD technically. I think I might be, but I know that karate was the first time it was like, you got to get through this whole thing with a sort of discipline and vigilance. Now, how does that then become a fighting thing? For me, it just comes to the idea of being humans. Like once we make a conscious bridge, there is one, but if we don't, there probably isn't. And that goes again back to bunkai. Like if we say, oh yeah, there's this move here is either a low block of a kick or blocking a punch. Well, until I try that, it kind of isn't either. It's just a concept on a wall. And so that's where I then bring the discipline and the diligence into something that would actually visually be reflected in how I move in a conflict, even if it's a replicated one through sparring. So I hope that makes sense, because in my head it does. But until I apply it consciously, there isn't a bridge. But once I do, the bridge is anything I want it to be. That's our gift as conscious humans.
Thanks for that. There's some nice reflections in there. Randy, how about you?
Listen, classical training's harder. It's just fucking harder than period. Like I'm willing to talk to anybody about it. Yesterday I did an hour of kata training by myself and 2 hours of iaido training by myself. And it's fucking hard to have that discipline to do it. And classical training is harder because it builds your body and your mind as sense of legacy. And everybody's been talking about here. I just think it's harder. And why? People come in with an expectation, right? Like when they walk in the door to the dojo, they have an expectation. And it's very few of them that the expectation is get me in better shape. Most of the people who walk in the door are like, I want to be able to kick somebody's ass if I get in a bad spot, right? That's why they come to these places. But that expectation needs to be balanced against time, in my opinion. It takes time to develop that mind. It probably takes time to develop that mind more than anything. The body gets developed relatively quickly, I think, and then it's more about like, you have a sword, just keep sharpening the sword, just keep swinging the sword. Once you've built the sword and you know how to hold the sword, it's about, and it's that time, I think. So I don't know. I just think classical training is harder. So that's why it's better. Like, I choose the hard way. I like to choose the hard way. Classical training is harder, and you need to build your mind through that hard training. The techniques come along with that. You need to have a good sensei, right? Like,
Yeah.
you need to have a good sensei to develop that mind. They'll tell you a couple of things that you can go off on your own and develop your body, but your mind is developed over decades of training with one person who's been ahead of you, I think.
Sensei, do you mind if I add one thing to that? I know it's not my turn, but studies have shown that new information to a person can feel like a physical attack, like our physiognomic response when you're told you're wrong at something is to feel attacked. And so the idea that you have a teacher who goes, no, this way, you're actually replicating the physiology of being attacked when you are told you're doing something wrong. And so to submit to a sensei who tells you how you're doing things, including wrongly, is actually to create in your body getting used to the feeling of being attacked.
I love that. Yeah. And then practically, if you have a sensei like Sensei Legacy, you practically get attacked as well regularly. Before I'm going to send it back to Sensei Suino, and then Sensei, you can punch it off to whoever you want. But one of the last things I would say to reinforce some of my comments would be that, you know, I've talked to Mark Hominick. We've all talked to Leo, Laux, and Brad. Leo and Brad, who are world champions in kickboxing, said, I'll take any classically trained martial artist who've done 18 months of training over anybody just walking in the door. That their preference would be to have somebody who's been trained classically for some period of time before they walk into the sport realm. Just because it's harder. You don't have to teach them how to pick their knee up, how to use their hip, how to like keep their punches straight, and we're talking a lot about karate. Grappling might be different, but I gotta believe that in most UFC gyms, they would prefer that somebody had a classical background in judo or BJJ before they tried to start trying to teach them how to get into the ring and use it practically. They would rather that, I think. So, Sensei, who do you want to punch it over to for questions or comments?
Free Sensei, you got a way you want this conversation to go?
Well, actually, it's funny with what Randy just said about the, a classical trained martial artist and then a non-classic going to like a UFC style gym. And I think of, this isn't really a question, it's kind of a comment. But when I started training with Tom, when we did the courses with him, they were long days, and anybody that came to his certifications, the ones that had classical training in any martial arts were leaps and bounds ahead of anybody that came to those courses that had never trained. In fact, I got to the point where I didn't want to work with anybody that didn't have previous training, because I just ended up getting hurt more than that, because they had no idea what they were doing. They had no control. They had no feel. It was just crazy, actually. So, and then guys that came in that had training were all great to work with. And not to say that guys weren't great to be around, but they just weren't always good to work with, because they just had no off switch, and they didn't know how to say stop when things were going too far. So it was quite interesting. So, classical martial artists just have a whole different kind of approach, I think. And I see that all the time. I'm sure you guys have all seen it as well, with people coming in and watching how they progress over time. And then people that come in and don't want to progress, and they just want to come in and do the fight thing. The people that just want to fight, I don't really think they ever last that long. They're there for all the wrong reasons, and they don't really get it.
Yeah, I like when you say that, James. When I think of you in particular, I think of a person where if you are a martial arts champion, right? You're a world champion, you won an Olympic gold medal, and you didn't diverge into the thinking of practicality, and they had to fight you. They'd have their gold medal stuffed up their ass in about like 2 seconds, and they'd be choked unconscious, and they'd be saying, what did I do wrong? Like, why did I spend the last 15 or 20 years doing this that anyway, just a comment. Yeah.
Other thing I could add here, just very briefly, is that martial arts, I want you to listen to this, is really 8,000 years old, right? And we draw from that 8,000 year experience. A guy who decides to take up, and I'm only using this as an example, I respect boxing, but a guy who takes up boxing and he's a good boxer and opens a gym, has 50 years of experience to rely on. So I could have used a karate club there or a skating club or anything. I just used boxing. So it is important, those small things like the salt, turning the steak over, and those things like that. We have a lot to draw from. And it's not all from one style. It's from martial arts, military arts. That's it.
James, do you have any questions for our group? Anything you want to like ask all of us?
I'm just trying to think here. I guess, when you think of classical kata, I guess what would be, from application point of view, what do you think to be the most important point to get across to students? Would it be like the basis of how they're working their stances and movements, or combinations, or putting it all together and basing on it? So I guess my question is, what's the most practical part of the application when we look at kata, if we're going to use it for real life?
How do you want to go, James? Who do you want to direct that to first? And
I'll go Sensei Suino first, and then just go around the table from there. Sensei Hanshi Legacy, and then yourself, and then Sean. Whichever, it's all good.
Do you mind if I punt? I'd like to hear a couple answers before I chime in on this.
Why don't we start with Sensei Legacy, because he'll have deeper thoughts on that. So
Okay.
Number one thing about kata is discipline. It teaches you to do and your body to move in certain ways, and it makes you the master of your body. You control it. Okay? And the second thing is self-discovery. So you discover your weaknesses and strengths, etc., so that you can start to overcome them. That's what I got from your kata. Right? It teaches you to have a calm mind so that you can see things as they are. For instance, if you look in the water, you're at a lake on a clear day and you look in the water, you see your beautiful face. But if you just put your hand in the water and move it a little bit, it distorts it. So it's a way of learning it to have a calm mind so you can see what's truly happening during the fight. And again, that goes back to being calm, empty-minded. Okay, the hardest thing is to be reactionary in a fight. And that's what you should be, because you're already thinking about things. You can't process what your body wants to do because of your hard training. Your hard training will do it all. You know, like you don't forget how to walk, right? Because you do it every day. You get up, you don't even think about it. You just walk. You remember walking to your desk? No, you just did it. Karate becomes the same thing. You know, a lot of times, if a martial artist, you can get attacked and I could be standing somewhere, a guy walk up, punch me in the side of the head. That's not the point of self-defense. Point of self-defense is after he punches me in the head, what the hell is going to happen to him? Right? It's like your friends can walk up beside you and grab you in a headlock. You think they're putting their arms around you. You can't react to that because there's no real point to start from. Once things get started, once you're aware, then it's hard to empty your mind and go into that. So I know I'm talking about the mind a lot, but I think that it's very much like the drops in an ocean. You know, the ocean is full of drops, but who sees them?
Suino, do you want to take it now, or do you want to punt it to me or Sean for James's question, or what do you want to do?
Well, I have a thought that kind of arose as she was talking. All the successful street fights I was in many years ago, often arguments that I got into, you know, if someone was suddenly hostile, or fights that never materialized, right? That someone was threatening and it didn't come about. There's that moment where you have that instantaneous recognition that this is a very serious moment. And often it is accompanied by a flood of adrenaline. But I noticed the most successful interactions like that I've had, it's also accompanied by a emptying the mind, by just getting completely calm and completely in the moment. That's a great thing to have available. And when personally, and I'd like to hear others' thoughts on this, when I bow and I open for a kata and I start, I'm essentially doing the same thing, clearing the mind and being right in the moment at the time. So it's interesting. I don't know that I've thought about it this way before, but that moment when you prepare yourself for a great kata performance or practice is very similar to that moment when your mind gets clear and you are fully present in the moment, preparing for a really dangerous or scary experience like a street fight.
I like that sense, you know. One thing I'll say is, in my entire life, the person that I've seen like demonstrate practically no-mindedness is you. Like, there are 2 or 3 opportunities in my life where I've watched you do a cut. I think it was like, one was like a few years ago, just like Junto Sono each. No, it was Mai. You were doing Mai. And I just remember you doing it and thinking, oh my God, for once in my life, I would love to be able to do a cut like that. And it was not about the technical proficiency. It was about your detachment from the world around you as you were doing the cut. Like, which I don't think you can learn outside of kata, whatever kata might be. So I just want to provide that. Sean, do you want to answer Sensei Freeze's question about kata before?
Yeah,
and then I'd like to, before we turn it, maybe before, Sean, you answer, I'll answer. And then Sensei Legacy, if you have a question for the panel, why don't you ask all of us a question about this topic, classical versus practical? So Sean, answer, go ahead.
Yeah, for Sensei Freezes, I want to say one quick thing about Sensei Suino's topic after too, but for Sensei Freezes, for me, it's pretty straightforward. Like, what's the most important concept from kata to bring across? And for me, it's that it doesn't have to look like it looks in the kata. Like, it can't look like it looks in the kata. And something Sensei Dauphin, we've been working on a lot lately is like, even directionally, like, you think you're moving that way, it might be coming from there and you're going the exact opposite way. But to take it even further, like, the more time I spend with it, it could be a quarter of a move that's just that, and that's the opening opinion need in, but just that moment is breaking a grip or whatever. And so I love the idea that it just, like, the stances don't have to be there, the hands don't have to be in the right order, it doesn't have to look that way. But to begin as a white belt, for me, it needed to start that way. And once I get facile with it, eventually it can get more creative. But quickly to Sensei Suino's idea, one thing I want to say is, for me, that bowing and the opening of the kata and the emptying of the mind, I find it, for it to be totally useful, it has to be in relation to something else. Because if I do that in the park and I clear my mind, I'll find the second that I'm in front of Sensei Dauphin or Hanshi Legacy, I tense up in a different way. My throat gets a little drier. And that's more like the real world. And so I kind of always have to put it in a context of where I'm challenged, or else I'll get an illusion that I'll be super calm and empty when the thing happens. I know that I won't. Like, I'm not that guy. Fight, flight, I live in freeze. It's happened enough times for me to know. And so I need to face that freeze when I'm in front of my sensei and they ask me a question and I get a little tight. Anyways, I just want to put that out there. Like, my mind clearing in the park can be misleading that I'm a mind clearing expert.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Listen, in the group chat, Sensei Suino and Sensei Freeze have said, can we take a quick piss break? And just like Joe Rogan, we're going to allow guests to take a piss break. And then this is what I want people to do. Since they say, I want you to think of your question while people are running off to piss. And then when we come back, I'm going to give an answer. But while they're running off to the bathroom, I like this. I actually like it. People, get out of here, James. You got that look on your face like you need to have a leak. Right?
Yeah, I'll be right.
Okay. Sensei Legacy, let's talk about them now while they're gone. I really do like, Sensei, what you say about the mind. Like, when you're talking, like you say, oh, I'm bringing it back to the mind over and over again. If you have only technique but no mind, what do you actually have?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Are we on now? Are we on?
We're on. You and I are still chatting while we're waiting for them to come back. The little ones have to go more often, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good discussion, really good. But people forget, you are just this little spot of light about the size of your baby fingernail underneath your navel, between your front and back of your body. And the physical part here is, for instance, Richard Kim used to tell us, you can separate the brain from the cranium, but you can't separate the mind. So that's why I went to him. I went to him to feed me stuff like that, so I would start understanding that. Because with Benny Allen, he taught you how to destroy everything in sight, and and he could. And I was looking for another part to myself so that I could be a better martial artist. And those are the things that Richard Kim provided for me during my 10 years of training with him. So the mind, like the spirit and the mind are separate, but they can't live without the body.
Right.
If you destroy the body, those two things are gone.
Yeah. Everybody's back. Everybody's had. This is so Joe Rogan-esque. I hope he watches this. I hope somebody says, hey, there's this knockoff small podcast that quoted you a couple of times. And yeah, I'm happy. No problem. It's early in the morning. People have drank too much coffee. And so I want to bring it back to what Sensei Freeze talked about, which is what's the thing you would teach your students about kata or a concept. We went around the horn on that, and I'm going to give my answer, and then we're going to turn it to Sensei Legacy if he has a question for the group for us to think about. You know, James, the thing I want to build on what Sean said, and it's something that Sensei Legacy taught me really early on and continues to teach to this day. And, you know, Ian Abernathy has made it really popular these days, which is the kata teaches you where you need to be, not where the opponent is. And I think a lot of people kind of fuck that up, right? Like they think, oh, I can only do this kata, whether it's iaido, judo, karate. I think if you do kata and you think this move and this kata is only if the person's coming at me from the left. No, that's bullshit. Like it's where you need to be in order to apply those movements from the kata, right? So that's one thing I tell students, and I would encourage all instructors to tell students, don't tell them the attack is coming from the left. Tell them that if they want to do these techniques, they need to get themselves into position to actually do those techniques. So that's number one. And Sean kind of touched on that. Number two, I would say is, I guess Sean touched on this too, is anything you do, like if you do your shudo here at shoulder height, that represents the totality of that movement in all applications that your mind can come up with. And we're coming back to the mind, right? So it's, okay, if somebody blocks and you shudo, that's great. If they punch with their right hand and you block with your left, that's great. If they punch with their left hand and you block with your left or strike with your left, that's also okay. If they go to grab you and you shudo and step behind them and slam them to the ground and kneel on their throat, that's also really good, right? Like all of those things, the kata should be like expanding your mind to contemplate all of those situations. And I think that's one of the things that actually, for when people say, oh, you can't do a kata on somebody. Well, watch the last UFC fucking match. Like they all did katas on each other. That's what they fucking did. They did katas on each other, right? Like, so that's my thinking when a student's like, oh, is this a dance? No, it's not. Not if your mindset is right, right? It's where you need to position yourself, and that move that you do in that kata represents any possibility that your mind can come up with. And, you know, Sensei Sandoval used to say that all the time. We would train with him and we'd go, hey, Sensei, is this a bunkai? And he'd go, let me see it. And then you'd do it. And he'd look not at the person doing the bunkai. He'd look at the person and go, that was receiving the bunkai. And he'd say, does that hurt? And they'd go, oh yeah, it fucking hurts like crazy. And he'd go, that's a bunkai. Right? Like, well, then that's one, right? Like, so anyway, that's my answer to your question, Sensei Freeze. And we're at 10:55. We've been going for almost an hour now. Let's give Sensei Legacy the last question. And let's go around the horn on that last question. And let's wrap this up for a Thursday morning.
This goes by so fast. Holy man. I get
So fast.
so many
Okay.
thoughts in my head as you guys talk. It's amazing just to hear all you guys. Wow.
So just to an overall statement is, you know, because you're talking about all the physicality of everything. All martial arts are different, but all martial artists are the same inside. Okay, because that trains your mind in a different way, but for the same thing. So my question to you would be, can we change the physicality of martial arts and still keep it classical? So in other words, can we change the pinyans or the heians or any existing kata, and would that still remain a classical style?
Great questions. That's it. Who do you want to direct it to first?
Anybody? How about you? You're never first. Go ahead.
I always think of the classical not as the moves. I think of them as the traditions, right? So what your teacher taught you that you're passing on is what the classical is, right? Like that, those things that you've put inside of yourself at the core of your being. I consider that to be the classical, and I hope that's an essence that's been passed forward from the Buddha all the way through to all of us today. That there's some element that the Buddha brought to the Shaolin Temple, that the Shaolin monks taught to Matsumura, that Matsumura passed along. You got it, then somehow I got it, and that's the classical part of it, I think. I guess another classical part in my mind would be the things that work and the things that don't, right? Like when you see some Morai who's got like a telephone pole on their shoulder and they're swinging that down to try and touch somebody's head, like, you know, that's stupidity. Like that's not, so what is also classical is, you know, what's possible. Classical is what's possible. So classical for me is what gets passed along to you from your teacher that you accept and you pass along to other people. And it's also classical is what your training allows you to do in a practical way. That's my answer. Sensei, who do you want to go to next? Sensei Legacy, who?
Sensei Suino.
When we interviewed Lance Gatling, he kind of opened everybody's eyes about Kano Sensei, Professor Kano, who the world thinks of as the inventor of judo and a martial artist, but who is in fact a classical Renaissance man. He was a politician. He was an influencer before that term was created. He was an internationalist. He had great cultural values as well as great values when it comes to a martial art. And he was also an innovator. So he changed martial arts by taking old jujitsu systems and combining the techniques in certain ways, or picking and choosing which ones you could use in judo. So yes, I believe you can change some of the physicality as long as you have an eye toward the important classical values, like self-improvement, like bettering society. Yes, of course, self-defense. I think you can be classical and do kettlebell workouts because that's an extension of the mindset, right? So yeah, my short answer to that question, that rather difficult question, is yes.
Who next, Sensei Legacy, James or Sean?
James, yes.
Yeah, I that's a really good question. And then I hear both Randy's answer and Sensei Suino's answer, and you got me thinking all different directions here as to how I want to answer the question, because they both make so much sense. I mean, I think that traditional kata is passed down for a reason, like classical kata, and then that it shouldn't be changed, so that it keeps its core value. And then I think of people like Bruce Lee, who took and changed a lot of things to make it practical for himself, and kept all that, you know, no matter what he said, it was still a classical type of training and everything he did. He was just so good at it. And he applied those techniques as well. So I kind of flip a little bit both ways but I mean, I would never change a classical kata to make the movement different, because that would change what it was meant to be. I think you can go outside that box and change things to maybe for an application point of view. But if you change the katas and you pass it on to somebody else, then it's changed forever. And I think that you know, it starts to slowly erode of what the classical parts were meant to be in the traditional training. So, you know, if you want to take that stuff out, you can go train in you know, boxing or kickboxing and stuff like that, where they don't have those things in there necessarily. You know, but I think that, you know, I guess the classical part should remain. I think it's important, and then you build off that. So I guess that's my answer. But there's so much to think about there. Wow.
James, okay, good. Sean? And then we should probably go around the horn, Sean, after
Great.
just with final thoughts, like after you answer the question. Yeah.
Great. I wrote down a lot here. I don't want to take too long, but God, I love this question. I'm gonna go with my gut. My first response was 100% things can be changed. And the reason is because earlier in our conversation, I wrote down at the top of my page, classical martial arts includes innovation. Like this all got developed by doing this. But the next thing I wrote down is there's nothing more classical than evolution. And evolution is different than outright change. Right. So for me to come in and like, over time, this happens, that all makes sense. That's the innovation. But as soon as I just go, hey, this is now totally different. And it's that old philosophical question. If I have a boat and I replace a plank, nobody thinks it's not the same boat. But after 1,000 planks have been replaced, someone could argue it's not the same boat. And so where I go with that is like, what if your teacher didn't know what we now know? And they taught you a kata that had been restored badly. Just to go back to Shakespeare, there's versions in the 1800s of Shakespeare where all romance and body language was taken out because it was considered improper. And so that was wrong Shakespeare, but somebody learned that as Shakespeare. And so is it bad for them to go, wait, I'm learning new things like there was an original? So the point is we never know. Now, the last thing I wrote down is, but also you got to have the balls to just invent something new and not pretend the old thing is what you're trying to make it. Pinya Niden is a real thing. It'll evolve over time and get distorted or undistorted. But if you don't want to do Pinya Niden, just fucking make up something new. That's just as classical as anything else.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Sean, because I held this book up, right? Like this book about Itosu. And if you read that book, Matsumura wouldn't consider the pinyans to be classical katas. He'd say, what the fuck are those things? They're not actually classical. But today we're all sitting here saying, oh, Giksai-ich, Giksai-ni, pinyans, they're all classical katas. But the people before those were invented would say, I don't even know what the fuck that is. Like, that can't be classical, right? Yep. But we've accepted it as classical. Let's go around the horn with final thoughts on this topic. If you don't mind, Sean, I'll direct a little bit. So you can go first, Sean, on what you think is classical. I'll go next. Then we'll go to Sensei Suino, then Sensei Legacy, and then James, you'll have the final word on this topic, and then that's it. So Sean, what do you think?
I can't honestly say I have a complete answer about what I think classical is. I just know that lineages tend to make things feel that way, like inventing brand new things as part of a lineage, great. Out of the blue, backflips left, right. I don't know. That wouldn't feel classical to me. So I also like the idea of something that has a complete mind, body, spirit aspect. That doesn't even have to just be martial arts, but that to me is what tends to make something a little more classical. And again, I kind of said this in my answer to Sensei Suino, like the conscious desire to bridge, let's say, kata and fighting makes there a bridge. The conscious desire to be part of a system that has roots inherently makes it classical. And then I will personally make mistakes along the way at executing, and I'm fine with that. The last thing I want to say is, God, I feel so lucky to be a part of these chats, like student always. And, Hanshi Legacy, like I'm just going to literally sit for the next week and consider the idea of ripples distorting. If your mind's not calm and you've got ripples, you'll distort the truth. And I'm taking that away from art. Like I'm putting that like, wait, what am I doing in my relationships? What am I doing in relation to how I perceive my past, how I perceive work? What ripples am I adding that are distorting what's probably a very simple truth? And I love that I get to walk away at noon on a Thursday or 11 on a Thursday and start my day this way. So thanks to everybody, and especially for that thought, which is rippling through me right now.
Awesome, Sean. That's a really good answer. For me, before I turn it to Sensei Suino, I'm going to say, I often quote my daughter, Sydney, my oldest daughter, because I talk to her a lot and she's a deep thinker. And I remember her once when I was coaching her on things about practicality and martial arts. And she said to me, Dad, why do we have to call it sexual assault? Why do we have to target the genitals? Why can't we just say assault? Right? And I was like, I went away and I was like, oh, that's kind of a crazy thought. Like, why do we have, humans want to do that, right? So why do we have to call it classical martial arts? traditional martial arts, practical martial arts. In my mind, I just think all the time, like, aren't we all just martial artists? Whether you do grappling and you don't bow to anything, whether you do swordsmanship, whatever it is, can't we just keep the principle that we're all martial artists in mind, right? We're all martial artists and have a respect for the fact that we've all embraced a martial arts lifestyle. And for some martial artists, certain things are important, and for other martial artists, other things are important. And can't we just have respect for all of that, for all of whatever that might be, right? That's what I would hope, because I think we'd all be stronger if we did that, right? To say, I don't agree with a reverse jumping scorpion kick to the head and on TV. That's not something I'm going to do, but good on you for doing it, man. Good on you, girl, for training that, right? That's my thought as we end this. Sensei Suino, I'll punt it over to you.
One of my newer young students blew me away the other day in a conversation. She mentioned, Taoism, and she said, Sensei, it's true. There's like the yin and the yang, the two things, but there's also the 10,000 things, right? And that's kind of what you just referred to, Randy, right? There's martial artists and non-martial artists. And if we want to be inclusive, right, then we just say, listen, we're all doing martial arts and that's a good thing. But there's also the 10,000 things, the details, right? The difference between Wing Chun and BJJ. And when it comes to innovation or maintaining classical traditions, all opinions are not equal. You have to merit the right to get respect from a worthwhile audience. If Hanshi Legacy invents a new kata, I'm gonna fucking pay attention. He's put the work in, right? He's got the credentials to do it, right? But not everybody in the martial arts world can do that. So I think there is such a thing as a classical martial art. I think there's also such a thing as a classical martial artist, or somebody with enough gravitas to be a part of the tradition. And that's a conversation I'd love to have more, a longer version of at some point in the future on Punch, Kick, Choke, and Chat.
Yeah, you said that, and I thought the next topic could be, can you grow a martial arts program or can you not?
There's only two kinds of instructors.
So we're gonna go to Sensei Legacy and then Sensei Freeze, and then we're gonna stop recording.
Well, something that's classical, I believe, is something that's withstood the sands of time, sort of. Like it's 8,000 years old and we're still doing it today. The other thing is in the name itself, martial arts. Martial stands for military, and art stands for anything that is done. Something that's an art is something that will serve you 90% of the time, every time. It has to be that. That's what an art is, there's no real deep mystery about it. It's just that that's why you have to work all those years. You have to make that work for you 90% of the time, or it's not going to serve your purpose. You got to get the hell beat out of you just talking about fighting. You got to get the hell beat out of you 5 out of 10 times. That's not very good martial art. Right? You may lose a confrontation maybe 1 time out of 10 because you've trained hard, and this type of training produces that for you. Okay, and then as far as changing it, you look at hockey, our national sport. Just imagine putting McDavid on the ice back in 1925. He would score like 40 goals a game, or maybe even 50. It just needs to be done that way. Okay, and if you do anything, you take up anything that's going to serve you 90%, you're going to need to do a lot of work, but it's going to serve you well.
That's awesome, Sensei. Like that hockey analogy.
Yeah.
It's still hockey, right? It was hockey in 1925 and it's hockey in 2022. It's still hockey, right? James, what do you want to take us out on, brother?
Holy man, I have so many things going through my head. I'm so happy to be on this call with you guys. It's hard to put a thought together for a final thing here because the classical side is so important. I think, and then it passes stuff down, and, you know, for applications and all those things, it's the discipline, but I mean, you know, the classical arts and through the mental process teaches us to kind of acknowledge our fears and then step up to them, because at some point in your training, you're going to realize you're scared of something, and maybe don't want to go through it, but the training and through proper coaching through senseis and stuff like that will help you face those fears and get through it. And there's always going to be something new, right? So no matter how long we've trained for, how long we've done things for, there'll be a new fear, a new thing. And I think that the training and the application will help us through those things mentally and physically. You know, kata limitations are mental, for physical, you know, and movement. But I mean, it's so good, right? And there's so many thoughts I have here. I'm looking at my couple notes I've made, but it's you know, it's so important, and I think it's to stay on that track. I'll stop there because I'm kind of mumbling here a bit, but hopefully I got my point across.
You did for sure, man. Yeah. So thanks so much, James, for I know you canceled a private lesson today to chat with us. I'm super grateful for that.
This has been great. I'm gonna do this. I'm taking my dog to the bush for a walk, and I'm gonna, you know, mentally think about this whole chat the whole time. It's made my day to be awesome. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, I hope other people watch this chat and they learn from it. And it's fun to do these topic-based conversations, and we're going to continue to do them. So if you're watching this on YouTube, as Sean would say, smash the like button, the subscribe button, right? And reach out to one of us if you have a topic, or even if you think, here's a guest. Like oftentimes I get things, here's a guest, you should talk to this guest about this topic, send it in to us. And yeah, thanks everybody if you are subscribing and paying attention. And if you are a martial artist, thanks so much for that. So
thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.